thank you, Dana, for the introduction there. Joe and I are pretty excited to tell this story here today. So I'm Scott Stipetich, Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever, and just to kind of set the baseline on Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever, why I'm up here with Joe. I'm going to kind of help set the stage here and just really turn it over to Joe to tell the story today. But so to set a baseline with kind of why Pheasants Forever's up here, it's the philosophy of the organization. It's a personal philosophy of my own that our agricultural landscapes work really well for wildlife. I don't think I have to bend minds in this room to get some agreement there. Maybe it works too well in some situations. What I want to separate, though, is that they don't compete against each other, and that there are places on every farm that work for wildlife. And to further that, they can be profitable as well. And hopefully in today's presentation, we can get at that.
So we battle a lot. That's what we do because we work together. So he'll come up with something, I'll come up with something. We spent 2.5 hours going over the numbers you're going to see because we wanted to make sure they're right. I didn't like the title of this. I thought if this were a breakout session, who would ever come? It's so long. I just wanted to call it, it's not about water quality, because there's kind of a cool thing here that I've seen today. So to the organizers, God bless you, because we could talk about how we can take tons of soil loss out of 10s now with the rotation tools and the phosphorus index. We can take that down to 0 and 1. But no one's talking about that. We're all talking about how these practices are making our farms profitable, and that's pretty exciting because they're not exclusive of one another. They actually drive each other. So there you go.
Perfect. So I got to bring technology into this too, not just about profitability. And to do that, I'm going to take you back to my family farm, which is up in Bayfield County. There's not many that exist up there anymore. Actually, I believe they are 0 dairy farms. My uncle retired about 4 years ago. My dad was raising replacement heifers for him, and I was helping out with both operations. Believe it or not, when he retired 4 years ago, he was still carrying bales of milk from each cow to the tank. So it wasn't a big surprise that he retired. But anyways, I had to step away from Bayfield County to realize that the age of farming has progressed. And so it's kind of gone into the modern age, and now we're probably sitting somewhere in that tech age of farming. And we can use that technology, and Joe has used that technology to identify those areas of the farm that can be done, something can be done differently to change the profitability. When we talk about farming the best, I might be one of the few conservation-minded folks that doesn't disagree with this guy. So this is Earl Butz, Secretary of Ag in the 70s. He was kind of made famous or stayed relevant because of his comments, farmers should plant fence row to fence row. That was his mindset. And I don't disagree with that, although the ideas that he had and the ideas or how I interpret that are just a little bit different. And so I had an advisor to Earl, I might have said, well, let's just change that up a little bit. Let's say, farm fence row to fence row. Let's just not plant the same thing across all the acres. And I can make Joe famous as well here. His words are better than mine. And this was a comment that Joe said to me, early on in our relationship, and it's stuck with me because it's so simple, but yet it's lasting and makes so much sense. Is that every acre on the farm has a purpose.
Did you find it or take this picture? I thought I was
He fits in there really well.
Somebody take a picture and put that on Twitter. Okay, so to further along then, as we look at the numbers, the technology side of things, there's a chief senior economist at Wells Fargo. He's an ag economist, and he kind of looked at numbers across farms across the country. Then he summarized it in a blog post that he had, that there's acres on every farm, regardless of the size of the operation, regardless of the commodity that's grown, that 20% of those acres lose money. A portion of them break even, while the majority of those farms are turning a profit. We have the technology today to isolate those bottom acres. There's inherent danger, I guess, in the 60% and the 20%, the difference from the top and the bottom. And it really comes down to how we measure success and how we traditionally measure success. When we think about, a field whole and we look at yield averages or profit on the field as a whole, we're not isolating, any variability in the field. So it's important to recognize that, and through the use of technology in Joe's operation, we were able to isolate these areas. We were able to redefine, field boundaries and kind of break out those acres that we're losing them. So how we do this, in Joe's operation, we were using two kind of software platforms, or, a couple different software platforms, which we can get into if folks are interested, but the concept is the same, and it works really across most all platforms that I've experienced in my job. And we're layering, at the very basis, yield data on top of each other. We're looking at multiple years of yield data, so we're assessing a trend versus a snapshot in time. We're also layering budgets. That's really a big one, and the titles and the emphasis that have been put on the presenters earlier, emphasize that the numbers matter. So we're putting that on top of our yield, and then we're also including, variable rate information where it makes sense. And so we're combining this profit map, or this return on investment map, where we can start looking at different areas of the field. Now, the advancements in technology have allowed us to not only just look at this as one field, but now we can start zoning out these areas and seeing how they perform compared to other areas of the field. This is likely not new to many of you in the field, in this room, and I applaud you if you've been doing this. If you haven't, hopefully start considering. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Joe.
So I got to say to Jacob, Pete, and Brody, you guys really made my morning miserable, because on your slides I could see field and then out in the distance horizon. Okay, this is not the case in Buffalo County. If you go to those woods, you're going to look down, that's a bluff. If you're on the bottom side, you farm up until you face into the bluff. So we've got, at one time, we had 108 fields, and 108 fields, average 8.3 acres. We did combine some, but a lot of our fields run up against woods like this. And so that's why, if you want to flip back again, really that, not to say in a water quality conference, but what drove us to put these field edge borders, and there's a whole story about me and Buffer, so we negotiated out that these are field edge borders. That way I didn't have to debate myself about buffers forever. But we started looking at, I'm not sure what the next slide has on there, which is really interesting because you have a set of logic that goes into your matrix. Mine was really simple. Corn was sub $3. I figured out, and this is just a rough guesstimate, but I didn't think I could afford to cut brush and trim brush and keep brush back with a corn planter. It's hard on the planter, it's hard on the tractor cab, and the corn never does worth a darn under that shade. And we got some slides that'll show you that. But it was the easiest way to keep brush out of the field. And, I got to get every acre of corn in I could. And then, like I said, when those prices got low, I started looking at what can I do to adjust my operation. I would do the same thing at our farm with the cows. If I got a cow that's not performing like the rest, I'm certainly going to look over. I'm going to have the vet check her out. We're going to see if there's anything holding her back. But if I can't find out anything holding her back, she probably won't be with me long. I'll give her some opportunity to succeed somewhere else. These crop acres, it's starting to be the same thing there. We're looking at that. If I'm going to lose money on that acre, what's something else we can do? What I won't do is leave it sit idle and become more brush. So we found something else to do. So I think I covered some of the things. I talked about the brush management. You got these fields, you can't get to them from one side or another. And if you look at this, I didn't get that from walking very far, so now I can get the pickup and go around all sides of the field and even check from the cab. My agronomist does suggest I get out once in a while, so we try, but I try to minimize that as much as I can. We've started haying those strips. Now, I'm going to tell you now, you are not going to dry beautiful hay under the shade of the tree, right? But if you let it mature a little bit, you can still get a couple of clippings, at least cover your cost of mowing it a couple times a year, and that'll be for dry cows, young stock, or wherever else you want to put it. So we have started doing some of that, and it really goes along on a farm with the hills, the woods, and everything we have. Every area of that farm get managed somehow for something. I mean, the woods we manage, we still even burn about 30 acres, 40 acres a year. We labor up, we create great deer habitat. we manage it for that. We're gonna get into some of the street lake areas where a bad thing happened and we found the light and we're doing better things there. But that's what we kind of look at that farm. We don't want to let anything go to waste, don't want to let it rot the brush, but we want to be able to work with it. So that's an example here. We'll shoot through. I think you can just go to the next slide. That's actually, what does it say up there? See, look at that, 30 acres. That's one of my biggest fields. She's beautiful. So we're looking at here. So this is going to be one of the case studies here today. So we're looking at a 30-acre field on Joe's farm, total field profit. So we ran that analysis. We layered a couple of years on top of each other, using $3.50 corn when we first ran these analysis. The whole field was green, right? So if we looked at kind of that historic side of success, the whole field averaged $139, $140 an acre profit. That's what I'm talking about. So that's what we farmed up to the woods. You can see the cobs, you can see the corn. You started from zero. Everybody's going to say, oh, the deer. It's not the deer. It's the shade. It's the roots pulling nutrients and moisture from the woods. The deer, it's actually very interesting. Since we've left that 30 feet around the edge of the field, you'll see that later on. That outside row of corn is as tall as the second one in. It's beautiful. But we were finding that there isn't a single cob on the edge of that field. That didn't even by anybody. It just never came. Yeah, so Joe kind of alluded, we took 30 feet and we realized in the analysis that 30 feet was the worst. And, Joe knew that. I just backed it up with the numbers that were his anyways. And so on this map, you can see how that 30-foot buffer, or not buffer, that 30-foot border is drawn out in red there. And you can see how the two fields performed. So we were, on the best ground, Joe's making $205 an acre. On the poorest ground, losing, almost $180 an acre. Time to figure out something different. You want to explain these? You can keep going with the numbers. That's how we work this out. I stick these numbers.
All right.
Keep effort here.
So the box on the upper left-hand side there is how the field kind of originally performed with those multiple years of history. So we're looking at total field expenses, total revenue, and field profit. Now, if you have trouble seeing those numbers, just kind of know that the field as a whole is turning a profit of about $140 an acre. For those that are still kind of in that yield mentality, we're at about 191 bushel per acre. The box right below it is how that field is going to perform with 25 acres of farming the best, 5.1 acres of that 30-foot strip around the outside.
Still paying rent out of that.
Yep, this is a rented field, $150 rent that goes in. So we kept that rent in the expenses for the whole field. So it's still paying rent on those 5.1 acres.
I'll touch on that a little bit as we started this. Some folks are really excited about strip around the edge. You think 30 feet don't add much. If we go the rest of the way around that field, that 30 feet becomes 30 acres. So it's a lot in a long time when we have these smaller fields. It's my second one. Called me now, landlord, saying, you know what, take that off the rent. I'm not going to charge you on that border because I like it because they can get around. That's the other benefit. If they want to go hunting, they can get to all access to their farm, get around, go walking, do whatever they want. So I think you're going to touch on that in a minute. But these numbers are, we just need the cost of that rent.
And we also, for the field revenue, we didn't take any revenue for hay because we weren't sure if we were going to be able to dry that hay, make any money. So it's really just idled acres paying rent on it. So the field profit, it jumped now. So from the original to the improved, it's a $5.28 acre, $1 an acre difference. And that can be seen on the table on the right.
I recognize here 528 is not a lot, but once you start putting that over more and more acres, and you think about it, we're asking for $5 discount on our crop insurance. We're asking for a $5 here. So I listened to a podcast once where Ben was talking to hospital administrators, how they would raise their profit. He gave a whole bunch of ideas. And the one administrator came up to him and said, you know what? Unless you give us something 10, 15% move, we're not even interested. He goes, you ain't got 10 and When you think about it in our farming, we're so careful with what we do, it's often a matter of little things incrementally added up. That's exactly what we told those administrators. I give you a whole bunch of 1 or 2 percenters that'll make 10% for you, but I can't find you one thing.
Yeah, I mean, the other important note, or at least it's important in my mind, and I kind of asked Joe about this a little bit, is the expense, how much it has to get that dollar rack out. And so in this situation, he's spending $2,000 less, make that $5 more. So produce risk on the farm, and certainly in a situation where your inputs are highly variable, that's going to come into play a little bit bigger.
2,000 somewhere else.
Yeah, that's a great point. Kind of reinvest that capital to those more productive acres, change variable rate stuff, or just put it somewhere else in the farm. I think you covered these, but again, that field revenue, did not include any of these other opportunities that Phil sees on the farm. So removing rent, would obviously increase that and hay valuation that you can pull. We looked at conservation programs, but the management side of things, to have that wide open, to plant the mix that go on it. And in the financial sense, you don't need subsidies to make this work. And then the other thing that we're kind of looking at is, the insurance premiums, how that can be changed as you increase your yield, on a field by field basis or on a farm basis.
Depending on somebody else's desires, so got programs that they can put in place, right?
Yeah, we could have made some of these field profits. And we're going to see that, I think, in a later example. Well, everybody's, knew this question was coming, so we set up, right?
So we battled about this. We better check this out.
Yeah, hold it off to Twitter. Okay, so the day that we were sitting in Joe's house, we looked at the futures price, it was 523. We also looked at 2022 inputs. We said, well, if we adjust one, we got to adjust the other. Yes, I think I have those budgets later on in one of these slides, but we ran the numbers. If you follow kind of the transitions, the same way that we did on the last one, you can see that it's doing better actually at the lower commodity price that we did. Here's the two of them just compared side by side. Now these budgets are really small, but if you got questions on them, Joe's happy to talk about it. We'll work it out. They're real numbers, I guess, is why I threw them on there. The numbers are not as important. Any questions on that field before we move on to another one?
Yeah, sorry if I missed this, but are you still expensing the cost of machinery, the depreciation repair and stuff? Over to, I'm just curious if you're spreading the cost of carrying the machinery over, if you're taking the cost that was carried over those acres and allowing them to be productive acres, or are those still carrying?
To get the $5, we're no longer using the equipment. We're no longer putting fertilizer. We're no longer putting corn there. So those numbers were taken off for that border area. Right? I'm no longer expensing those.
Okay, my question would be that those, you're still serving the depreciation, you still have the disc sitting in.
No disc. Okay. You can't say that word here. They'll kick you out.
Sorry.
Okay.
You still got the corn planter. Is that, you still got the corn planter. Is that marginal cost being then allotted to those, is your cost of machinery going up on the productive acres then?
Oh, meaning I can't spread it over as much?
Yeah.
If you farmed here, you would know real quickly that anytime I put that planter in the ground, I am chewing her up real quick. So I'm actually coming on. This is the rockiest land on God's green earth. If you could walk the entire field and never touch dirt if you wanted to. So I'm coming way ahead of that machine sitting in the sheds. I would like to farm where some of these other guys do. I'd be happy to run it out there. So did we get down into that small detail? No, but just anecdotally, that's where I come in. Scott can tell you different, but this is some tough stuff up there. And that's the reason I'm there. Nobody else wanted it. So now I think we're going to transition to some other areas. We talked about field borders where I can't throw anything. But Scott will also talk to you about, you got areas on your farm. Again, every time I overlay my yield maps and my soil fertility maps and all of those things on top of these, you can't look at one in isolation, because it only tells you part of the story. When you look over all of those laid on top of each other, you start seeing some patterns. And you start seeing some things that no matter what you do, or maybe because of some of the rules in place you can't do, they're just not worth farming. So what else can you do?
So we'll run through this example, similar situation where the whole field was profitable, there were zones in the field that were not. So, your question,
That particular piece.
So your question was, conservation programs that are relevant for this one. So, at the hopping history, we looked at kind of all ends of the spectrum, ended up landing on, the conservation reserve program. So this is an area that, just historically, just did not pull its weight on the farm. And so, retiring it out of crop production and putting it into a 10-year contract for the return on investment was a good deal, or the deal that was in. So this area will get planted into prairie grasses and a bunch of flowers and whatnot, with better infiltration. This is a big flat of this valley, so all the water's going to come down that area. There's a channel alongside the driveway. That water tank will be able to fan out in 1 years, infiltrate down to the ground. It's a good use for that part of the farm.
And this particular farm is rented. An emphasis they have on is hunting and wildlife. So working with that person, getting that land out of the picture. Yeah, I could tile, it was fire converted, it's got all that stuff. But just the way that lays in there, it's something I'm not interested in doing. They're not interested in putting a lot of money into that particular piece down on the bottom. But if we can enhance that habitat in our area, Buffalo County is known pretty soon around the world for whitetail deer hunting and the rest. And so we do manage some of the farms to have that kind of habitat to bring people in. Did you say speed it up? Okay.
I don't notice that, Joe said we're not doing this for water quality, I know wildlife biology background, but there's very little talk about wildlife in this presentation other than at the very beginning. Joe's not doing this for wildlife either.
I'm doing it for profitability.
Yeah, I'm not showing them numbers, and I don't even have to talk wildlife, even though Joe is there's some motivation there for wildlife, but we don't have to have that conversation to make these changes. It's kind of one of those umbrella ideas, that works for many strings other than that. So here's kind of numbers on that farm. I got one that similar trend. He's spending $3,000 less, paying $36 more. Again, that is with the conservation program. Payments added on. On that one.
So maybe going back to
Just curious, going back to that previous farm, with border all the way around. So you talked about brush cutter, keeping it back, right? So how long has this been going?
we're probably on that one year 3.
Year 3. So with that species growing in there, is the woods continuing to creep out? Are you gonna have to move that line again in 10 years?
I will always have to, before I seeded it down, that's why it also took me a couple of years before I pay it. There's this wonderful machine called a mush hog, and that'll bust up those rocks, and I should pick them and myself. But we did go around the field once. We do that even if we're cropping. We'll take the dozer and trim back the small stuff and cut it. We're keeping with the mowing now, we're keeping that down by and large because around here, you don't have to wait long, you'll have a box out 10 feet out. I always say you kill one, 100 come to the funeral. So with that mowing, let's keep that line pretty attached. It's not going to be entirely painless for you. That's the nature of farming up against woods. But then in between, sure, keep stuff down.
Joe, I don't remember if you're capable or not with your chicken farm up there, but if you're taking these acres out of management or nutrient management, does that affect your total acres with spreading of chicken litter or dairy?
Well, we actually do. We do put, if working in the field, what I've noticed is, here's the water quality side of this thing, right? When they're pumping manure, it just seems that, I know you can't turn at the edge of the field if the edge of the field is grass, right? So when they're going with that drag line back and forth, you can clearly see when you're driving that field edge, where maybe they swung out and dropped manure on there. But yeah, those border acres are not included in my nutrient management plan. But they sure catch nutrients coming off the field, because you'll see that right away. That's where the water quality piece comes in. You can physically see that this grass is definitely a little bit greener right here than that one. But no, we don't include those acres as part of our plan. They're just out of the plan. With you would make this buffer, you could certainly fertilize it if you wanted to for the grass production, right? And keep it as part of your nutrient management plan. I don't have any streams or any of those setbacks that I have to worry about next to those woods either. Here's the street. Yep, here's another area. So I did a bad thing back in 1995. I started blasting through that striped up piece. I learned in 2020 that little 0.8 acres in the middle is a wetland. And then I had converted that, however. So not a good day, not a fun day. You're in big trouble when you do that. So again, by that time, I was closer, like Brody, I got a kick out of it. I'm closer to diapers than you are away from. Okay. So, a long time ago, but I learned that I could not farm in those areas. So now I could let that all go back into box elders and willows and stay away from it. But that's another one of those areas that we're working together, and we're putting in the native species again, I don't want any part of that farm not managed. So what you see there is that area that I'm describing, and Scott, through your program, we were able to get seed to keep that down. So still want to maintain that. We burn every brick bank acre that we have. It does wonders for keeping the box elders, the willows, and the junk out. Does a super great job of establishing a really strong stand of grass maintaining those stream banks. So this will work with our farming plan, with our burning plan, and hopefully again, on that side of it, while it's not for water quality for me, it'll act as a great buffer, wetland, and animal habitat. Scott?
Again, the technology's not here. We didn't have the yield history, we didn't have the technology here, but again, it's finding or maximizing every acre for, an optimal. All right, Becca? Yeah, I don't know if there's other questions. We have the time. Any other questions?
So Joe, in that field there where you cut off the end and put the pollinator base or whatever in there, up on the top part of that field, are the numbers on that one? I mean, you guys figured out with our farming here, got the same crap going on. We figure out a width or the size of the field for the first, where it's like,
Where it's more water.
we just shut the whole thing down and, mix it up for conservation program. Because I mean, I would look at that map like times back, one end, that went in. I think those figures up at the top there, got to be pretty close to an inch.
That is about as much as I can do. The rock inside of that is still pretty good yet, and so I farmed the rest of that area. There have been plenty of places that you couldn't give me. I get your call. I got this piece. I don't want it because it's going to be crappier than that. I've given up stuff. I remember the day I just had one word out. I'm going to let go of this one piece we were farming. It's back by now. I lose it back in there. Where I forget the name of that place. And I said, he was also my home officer. I was my home officer. I can't do this. He goes, why can't you rent my farm? How can you lend me money if I'm stupid enough to rent this farm? Right? So, it was a big test. There are places where it has better use. And I think there's probably 3-4 people that have farmed since then. There is a time that you get small enough. But with the combinations, we're able to work that. But even that piece that's taken down for the end. So that field is about 10 acres left. Because also the landlord wanted to chop the end off, and those are my favorites. Let's just leave half the field and half the field and we're gonna have
The 30 feet.
30 feet. It was real easy, it's easy to mark. And there was no science on 30 feet. And I'm sure there's places it should be wider, places less. I actually started this before Scott came in, and he just validated those things and it made sense because that is a wise thing. You talk about the technology. I had an experience with technology this summer. It was my fault. It was the problem. It was really hard to see where you were seeing with the like hard to see it. Getting frustrated. Where am I? So I went home and started. I got to get one GPS that I put on here so I can see where I'm driving. And I started pricing, and my wife started grumbling a little bit. And she didn't say anything. One morning when I got up, my glasses were sitting on the table. And you know, I actually tried them at work. Again, he was spot on. I said, $4,000. Yeah, I was right back. I can see what you were doing. This is great. I don't know if there's anything else, otherwise, thank you.
Let me give a shameless plug here just to close it out. So the services that I, offered Joe, we worked with Joe and some of the other guys in the group, that were part of what we're county, because of some of the partnerships that support my position, my counterpart, Josh Bednar, who goes in here, I can come into the northern part of the state. Work with the across the state. So, the service of the running the helping them to see.
Really helpful. And I was getting it. Please, not this.
I think it's